The envelope slipped from Caleb's trembling hands, landing face up on the polished oak table, its handwritten address glaring under the chandelier's glow. To Javier, my heart. His parents' laughter froze, their champagne glasses hovering mid-toast, as the room seemed to contract around that single piece of paper. It was their 25th anniversary dinner, and Caleb, their only son, had just shattered the night with a secret he wasn't ready to share. Caleb Washington, 22, had spent weeks planning this evening at his parents' sprawling home in Seattle's Capitol Hill. The dining room, adorned with silver balloons and vintage photos of his parents' wedding, buzzed with warmth until now. His mother, Diane, a 50-year-old black woman with a commanding presence and a career as a civil rights attorney, narrowed her eyes at the envelope. His father, Marcus, a 52-year-old black man and high school principal, set his glass down with a clink, his face unreadable. Across the table, Caleb's younger sister, Zara, 17, raised an eyebrow, sensing the storm brewing. "Caleb, what's this?" Diane's voice was calm but sharp, like a blade wrapped in silk. She reached for the envelope, her manicured nails grazing the paper. Caleb's heart thudded. He'd meant to give his parents their anniversary card, a heartfelt note he'd spent hours crafting. But in his nervous rush, he'd grabbed the wrong envelope from his backpack. The one meant for Javier Morales, his boyfriend of 6 months, was now in his mother's hands. It's nothing," Caleb stammered, lunging forward. But Diane was faster, sliding the envelope open with a practiced flick. Her eyes scanned the letter inside, and Caleb felt the air leave the room. The words he'd poured out last night, "I love you, Javi. I'm scared, but I want the world to know," were now exposed, raw and irreversible. Marcus leaned forward, his deep voice steady. "Caleb, explain. Now." Caleb's mind raced. He wasn't ready for this. Not tonight. Not in front of his parents, who'd raised him with love, but also with the weight of their expectations. College, career, a respectable life. Coming out as gay wasn't part of their vision, or so he feared. He glanced at Zara, who gave him a small, encouraging nod, her braids swaying slightly. She'd known for weeks, catching him and Javier sneaking a kiss in the park. But his parents? This was uncharted territory. "I didn't mean for you to see that," Caleb said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's personal. Personal." Diane's tone softened, but her eyes held a mix of confusion and hurt. "Caleb, we're your family. Why are you hiding from us?" The question hung heavy, and Caleb felt the weight of years of dodging questions about girlfriends, of changing the subject when his parents mentioned settling down. He'd grown up in a household where love was celebrated, but only the kind that fit their narrative. His parents were pillars of their community, vocal about justice and equality, but Caleb had always wondered if their principles extended to him, their son, loving another man. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice cracking. "I didn't want to ruin tonight. I love him. His name's Javier. We've been together for 6 months." The silence that followed was deafening. Diane clutched the letter, her knuckles whitening. Marcus stared at the table, his jaw tight. Zara reached under the table, squeezing Caleb's hand. Then, Diane stood, her chair scraping against the floor, and walked out of the room without a word. Caleb's chest tightened. He'd pictured this moment 1,000 times. Coming out, confessing his truth, but not like this, not by accident, not on a night meant for celebration. He looked at his father, hoping for something, anything, but Marcus only shook his head and followed Diane out. Zara leaned close, whispering, Give them time, Caleb. They'll come around. But as the anniversary cake sat untouched, the candles flickering out one by one, Caleb wasn't so sure. The next morning, Caleb woke to the sound of rain pattering against his bedroom window. He hadn't slept much, replaying the dinner in his mind, the look on his mother's face burning into him. He checked his phone. 3 missed calls from Javier and a text. "You okay, amor? Call me." Javier Morales, also 22, was everything Caleb hadn't expected to find. A graphic design student at the University of Washington, Javier had grown up in a tight-knit Mexican-American family in Tacoma. His warm brown eyes and quick laugh had drawn Caleb in from their first meeting at a campus art gallery. Javier was out, unapologetically himself, and his confidence had both inspired and terrified Caleb. Last night's letter was meant to be a step toward that courage, a private promise to stop hiding. Instead, it had blown up his life. Caleb dialed Javier, his voice shaky as he recounted the disaster. "They hate me, Javi. I saw it in their eyes." "They don't hate you," Javier said firmly, his voice a steady anchor. "They're shocked. Give them a chance to process. You're their son." Caleb wanted to believe him, but the silence from his parents' bedroom down the hall felt like a wall. He dragged himself to the kitchen, where Zara was already making coffee, her earbuds dangling. "They're in the study," she said, pouring him a mug. "Talking. A lot. I heard Mom crying earlier." Caleb's stomach dropped. "Crying? Because of me?" Zara shrugged, her expression soft but practical. "Not just you. It's complicated. You know how they are about family image. But they love you, Caleb. They're just figuring out how to handle this." He nodded, but doubt gnawed at him. His parents had always been vocal about acceptance. Diane's legal work focused on marginalized communities, and Marcus mentored kids from all backgrounds. But Caleb had overheard enough late-night conversations to know they worried about complications in their kids' lives. Being gay in their world might be one of those complications. The study door creaked open, and Diane appeared, her eyes red but composed. "Caleb, we need to talk," she said, her voice softer than last night. Marcus stood behind her, his expression unreadable but not hostile. They sat in the living room, the rain outside a steady hum. Diane held the love letter, now creased from being folded and unfolded. "This letter," she began. "It's beautiful, but why didn't you tell us? Why hide something this big?" Caleb swallowed hard. "I was scared you'd be disappointed. You've always talked about me having a certain kind of life. I didn't know if this fit." Marcus leaned forward, his hands clasped. "Caleb, we raised you to be honest. Not just with us, but with yourself. This," he gestured to the letter, "this is you being honest. We're not disappointed in who you love. We're hurt you didn't trust us." The words hit Caleb like a wave, relief mixed with guilt. He hadn't realized how much he'd been carrying, how much he'd assumed about their reaction. But Diane's next words brought him back to earth. "We need time," she said. "This is new for us. We love you, but we need to understand what this means. For you, for us, for our family." Caleb nodded, his throat tight. It wasn't rejection, but it wasn't full acceptance either. It was a start, fragile and uncertain. Over the next week, Caleb threw himself into his routine. Classes at the university, shifts at the bookstore, and stolen moments with Javier. They met at a small park near campus, where Javier sketched while Caleb read, their shoulders brushing as they sat on a bench. It was here, under the sprawling maples, that Caleb felt most himself, free from the weight of expectation. But the tension at home lingered. Diane and Marcus were polite, even warm, but their conversations with Caleb felt careful, like they were navigating a minefield. Zara, ever the peacemaker, tried to lighten the mood, blasting music or cracking jokes, but even she couldn't bridge the gap. One evening, Javier invited Caleb to his family's home in Tacoma for dinner. The Morales household was a stark contrast to Caleb's. Loud, chaotic, filled with the smell of homemade tamales and the chatter of Javier's 3 siblings. His mother, Rosa, a 48-year-old nurse with a contagious laugh, hugged Caleb like he was her own. His father, Luis, 50, a mechanic with calloused hands, clapped Caleb on the shoulder and asked about his studies. At dinner, Javier's hand rested on Caleb's under the table, a quiet reassurance. Rosa noticed and smiled, her eyes crinkling. "You two look happy," she said simply, and Caleb felt a warmth he hadn't expected. Javier's family knew he was gay, had known since he was 16, and their acceptance was effortless, unforced. It made Caleb ache for the same ease at home. Back in Seattle, Caleb decided to take a risk. He invited Javier to meet his parents, not for a confrontation, but for a chance to show them who he was with. He chose a neutral setting, a Sunday brunch at a cozy cafe in Fremont, hoping the public space would keep things civil. The morning of the brunch, Caleb was a wreck, pacing his room as Zara helped him pick a shirt. "Just be you," she said, tossing him a navy sweater. "And let Javier be Javier. They'll see what you see in him." At the cafe, Javier arrived first, charming as ever in a leather jacket and jeans, his sketchbook tucked under his arm. When Diane and Marcus walked in, Caleb's heart raced. Introductions were stiff but polite, and Javier's easy smile seemed to ease the tension. He talked about his art, his family, his dreams of opening a gallery someday. Diane asked questions, her lawyer's curiosity taking over, while Marcus listened, his expression softening slightly. Then, Javier reached for Caleb's hand across the table, a small, instinctive gesture. Caleb froze, expecting his parents to flinch. But Diane only paused, her eyes lingering on their joined hands, and Marcus gave a small nod, as if acknowledging something unspoken. The brunch wasn't perfect. There were awkward silences, moments where Caleb felt the weight of his parents' uncertainty, but it was a step. As they left, Diane touched Caleb's arm and said, "He's nice, Caleb. We just were trying." Weeks turned into months, and the Washington household began to shift. Diane started asking about Javier, small questions at first, how his classes were going, what he was drawing. Marcus invited Javier to a family game night, where he and Zara teamed up to crush everyone at charades. The love letter, once a source of pain, became a quiet milestone, a reminder of the truth that had set them all free. But the real test came at the end of the semester, when Caleb and Javier decided to move in together. They found a tiny apartment in Belltown, barely big enough for their dreams but perfect for their budget. When Caleb told his parents, he braced for pushback, expecting their old fears about complications to resurface. Instead, Diane pulled him into a hug. "I'm proud of you," she said, her voice thick. "Not just for this, but for being brave enough to show us who you are." Marcus joined them, his eyes misty. "We messed up, son. We should have made it easier for you to tell us. But we're here now, and we're not going anywhere." The night they moved into their apartment, Caleb and Javier stood on their balcony, the Seattle skyline glittering before them. Javier slipped his arms around Caleb, resting his chin on his shoulder. "You did it, amor," he whispered. "You brought us all together." Caleb smiled, the weight of the past year lifting. The anniversary disaster had been a mistake, but it had also been a spark. A messy, painful, beautiful beginning to a life where he could love openly, surrounded by family who, in their own time, had chosen to love him back. Their story wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, carved out of courage and compromise, a testament to the power of truth. And as they stood there, hand in hand, Caleb knew they'd write the next chapter together.